Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday evening training. Sorry for lagging a bit. I hope that this finds you well and that also you are able to spend the next 1 hour with us, as we too are very pleased to spend this time with you. In case you're joining us for the first few times, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Betty Olo, a long-time Neolife distributor. And as I always say, very happy to have this opportunity to speak about our products with you. So as you might have seen in your invitation, today we are talking about a healthy metabolism. And this is a topic that is of great importance now because a lot of the lifestyle illnesses that we come across as distributors, maybe amongst our friends and family members, are actually turning out to be linked to our metabolism. So, for that reason, I have the intention of having a number of training sessions on metabolism. So, this is just the first one. And this is because I thought we might touch on a number of different aspects of this topic. So for today, we are going mainly to do some introduction and talk about the food aspect of our metabolism. So let me invite you to relax, sit back, and spend the next 1 hour with us. And without further ado, I'd like to first maybe define the term a little bit. So as you might remember from your maybe high school biology, metabolism refers to the biochemical processes that occur in a living organism, and it refers to how to fuel and to build the tissues of the organism. So, in other words, there'll be a lot of chemical processes involved. Of course, we are not going to talk about this. We are not trying to take over the work of the biochemists and the doctors. What we'll be talking about is more of what we can learn for our own lifestyle and also what we can share with the people that we come across. And as always, I think I'll remind you again, the training usually does not cover everything there is to cover. That's not the intention. But the intention is to start you on a path where you can find out more for yourself. If maybe you find that you have questions in a certain area, you can either look it up yourself or you can send a question. So for the fact that our bodies are very complicated, we realize that metabolism is not just one process, but very many interconnected processes that work together with the aim of breaking down or recycling old and damaged tissue. So that is one of the things. Our bodies are always renewing themselves. A living organism as complex as us and others will be breaking down old cells, old tissues, and building new ones. There may be some damage that is occurring as a result of our activities or activities of other organisms around us and our environment. Then these damaged tissues will be broken down and recycled or excreted from our bodies. The other thing that the metabolic processes aim at is to build new tissue for growth and repair. So, of course, at earlier stages in our lives, maybe when we are children and adolescents, we'll be growing very fast and very much. So there will be a lot of building of new tissue in the growth and also in the repair area of our life. Then, thirdly, the metabolism drives processes that maintain health and life. So those are the things that the metabolic processes are involved in. Then the next thing is what are the raw materials that we actually use in the metabolism? So the metabolism is an interconnection of processes, but processes always involve other things. So what does our metabolism use as raw material? So there are three, of which we have oxygen. You know that we breathe in to obtain oxygen from the atmosphere through our respiratory system. And of course, we also breathe out. So that is how we get rid of what is coming out from the processes. So we get rid of what is not needed. The other raw material is water, because all of our metabolic processes occur in solution, and the solvent is water. And that is why clean, safe water is essential. It is a pity that there are our brothers and sisters still who are not able to easily get clean drinking water, because water is an essential ingredient for our metabolism and our health in general. Thirdly are the nutrients that we obtain from our food and our drink. So those are the ingredients. Then we have another two groups of substances that participate not exactly as raw material, but they also play very, very important roles, and we'll speak more about them in our next session. These are the hormones. So the hormones act as regulators. The regulators give signals. Okay, so if you think about maybe a train station or an airport, there'll be the airport regulators, and they'll be giving signals here and there. So the hormones are regulators, and what they do is give signals in different parts, tissues, and what they signal to is the beginning of a process or the end of a process. Then the second thing are the enzymes. So enzymes are also others that participate in our metabolism. They are what we call catalysts, and catalysts, what their work is to speed up processes, because these processes need to take place fairly rapidly, some not so rapidly, others very, very rapidly. So the enzymes play that part of speeding up processes that would not by themselves be taking place quickly enough. So those are the what I would call the raw materials that go into metabolism, three of them, and then the signal givers and the catalysts which speed up the processes. The third thing I want to mention here is the source of our nutrients. So you said nutrients are a raw material of metabolism, and the nutrients come from our food and drink. So what is food? Food, of course, is what we take in order to provide ourselves with nutrients. But we do need to realize that food also is what is available for eating. Different people have different availabilities of food. So for a person who is economically very constrained, what is available for them may be very, very also limited. For a person who is better off, they may have a wide variety available to them. But in general, whether a wide variety or a very narrow variety, food is what is available for eating. But the next word we use is diet. Unfortunately, these days, diet mainly means that you are in some kind of an eating program for a specific reason. But the actual meaning of diet is what is eaten out of what is available. So for instance, if you've got a child who hates vegetables, the fact that you have served vegetables on their plate and they have refused to eat it means that vegetables is not part of that child's diet. If you maybe have got some digestive problems and you find certain foods unpalatable, then the fact that that food is available to you does not mean that it is part of your diet, because yes, it is available, but it is not being eaten. So we narrow down from food, we narrow it down to the diet. The diet is what actually goes into your mouth and into your system. Then nutrients are what, out of your diet, you get the nutrients. The nutrients is the part of the diet that is digested and absorbed, because what is absorbed is actually what can be used as raw materials in the metabolism. So just to be aware of that, because we often have descriptions about this food and that food, but remember that the nutrients are going to be one of the most important raw materials in our metabolism. And if we are simply paying lip service to the fact that we need this and we need that, but it does not end up in our system, digested and absorbed, then it is not going to be part of our metabolism. So from there, we can go back to describing the different nutrients we have. We've got three that are called macronutrients because we need them in large amounts. I'm sure they are quite familiar with for you. Carbohydrates are the fuel foods. Proteins are the growth and repair foods. And then we've got fats or lipids, which are both fuel and long-term storage foods. So those are the big ones. Then we've got other types of nutrients that are required in small amounts, and we refer to them as micronutrients. This will include vitamins, it will include minerals, as well as plant-based nutrients that we get from plants and also from other sources. But just the fact that we need them in small amounts does not minimize the very important role that they play in our health. So if you think about something like vitamins, they are very essential for our good health. The same with minerals, and of course also with all the other micronutrients that we need in our diet. So those are the foods that the food divided into groups. From there, I'd just like to mention that, okay, the foods are there and we know we need to get adequate amounts of proteins to ensure that to ensure our needs for growth and repair. We need carbs for fuel, and we need lipids also. For lipids are used in manufacturing hormones. They are used in long-term storage. They are used in keeping us warm, and so on. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the complexity of the system that drives our bodies is such that we have to be mindful about what we put into our body. Once upon a time, the most important questions we needed to answer about our food was, what is it? And is there enough of it? What is it, in order to know whether it is palatable, whether it is poisonous, whether it has got some problematic aspect. So we didn't have many questions to ask. Once it was identified as a food item and there was enough of it for everybody to get, then off we went. But in the times we are living in, it is a cause of concern, of course, because our food has become a source of some serious problems for us. And therefore, the questions that we need to ask ourselves about food have increased. And it is so serious that we cannot afford to ignore these questions. So why has food become a source of serious concern because as a root of problems that we have? Number one will be food production. We have got things that are added in the process of producing food at the agricultural level, at the storage level, and so on. So food production, we also have now GMO added into there, which is still a hot topic of discussion. So the problem starts right from food production. We have to be concerned about where our food comes from. A simple example is, are you eating wild fish or are you eating farmed fish? It is not the same thing. Once upon a time, all the fish was wild. They lived in the river. They ate what was part of their food items in the river or the lakes or the sea, and then they would be caught. But now we know there is a lot of fish farming, and quite a number of the fish farms will use artificial food, or rather foods that they feed to the fish. And so that can be a source of concern depending on what the fish is being fed. The same applies to all sorts of foodstuffs like meat, the animals that we use for meat. And not only animals, if you also think about fruits and vegetables, many of them may be sprayed against diseases and insecticide. So our concern begins from food production. The next, of course, methods of storage. Because of the way we live now, there will be a need to transport food for long distances, it may be necessary to store them once they arrive at their destination, and sometimes even in the course of the transport. There may be a need to put additives to prolong the shelf life of the food. And so methods of storage can be a source of concern. We know that certain plant foods end up being stored for long in conditions that lead to the growth of fungus on the grains or the pulses. And so that's another thing we need to be concerned about. Then, of course, there is the intensity of processing. We have got from minimal processing, where there is very little done to the food, maybe just collecting and cooking. And then we have got a lot of other points there before we reach the ultra processed foods, which are have been processed so much that it is impossible to know what the original product was that was being processed. So because of those sources of concern, and because of the fact that malfunctioning in our metabolism has become so ongoing that, so maybe you had the two terms, dysfunction and malfunction. So a malfunction is when something does not work. Let's say a piece of machinery does not work, you say it has malfunction, and then it stops working and it gets fixed. On the other hand, we have got the term dysfunction, which means that the process is not working well, but it is ongoing. It continues to not work well. So this is what tends to happen in these problems that are related to our metabolism. Our metabolism continues and the malfunctioning continues, and eventually we end up with a serious disease condition. And these are things like type 2 diabetes is a very common example nowadays. It's shocking to think that maybe 3, 4, 5 decades ago, type 2 diabetes was a rare illness found in a very small percentage of society. We have got cardiovascular diseases also have shot up to a shocking degree, and so on. So because of the fact that these kind of common illnesses now are linked to metabolic dysfunction, there are these questions have to be asked about our food. First of all, what is it? You need to look at your food and ask yourself, what exactly am I holding in your hand? In my hand. It could be something that is in a box. A lot of the list, all foods now that you buy tend to have a list of things that tell you what is in it. But many times you see that many of the items on the list are chemicals which you don't know, and you don't have no idea how they're going to affect your food. So what is it is an important question to ask. What is in it is another question to ask because of all the food additives there are. What has been done to it because of the processing of the food? You may need to know what has been done to it. Now we can even buy food that has already been prepared that we simply take, like in the fast food. But if you think about, let's say you went and bought a packet of French fries or fried potatoes. Would you be able to vouch as to how many times the oil that was used to fry those potatoes have been changed? When was the last time they changed it? What kind of oil was it to begin with? How has the reheating affected the oil? So that is where the question of what has been done to it, what has been added to it, become so important. Another question is what has been taken out of it. When you look at a packet of flour, it says wheat flour. In olden days, it would be that simply the wheat grain was harvested, taken to a mill, and put in a packet. But today, a lot of milling is going to be done, and then there's going to be bleaching, there's going to be additives for this and additives for that. So we need to know what has been done to the food. And for this reason, but these many questions, I know it can cause us some anxiety, but this is just to say we need to simplify the process as much as we can. And one advantage I can say we still have in Africa is to simplify our food, because we still have many foods that simply come from the farm to the plate with very little processing. For most people in Africa, to choose excessively processed food is not necessarily out of necessity, it's often out of choice. And so maybe if you are in the group of people who have got a lot of variety available to you, it may be an important thing to ask yourself these questions about the food that you have in your hands when you're at the shop, or that you have on your plate when you're in the restaurant. And there is a saying that we have, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. I'm sure you have heard of this gentle old man from many years ago, who is called the father of modern medicine, Hippocrates. And the thing is, he said is that let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. This means that the first thing about food has to be the benefit it brings to our health. So we can think of food as a signal that we eat. Once it enters our body, what signal does it give? Does it give signals for health or signals for disease? Does it cause disruptions or does it cause benefits. So the attractiveness and the appearance and the profitability of the food should be of secondary importance. Of course, I know that every farmer would like to be able to break even and make some profit. Every food producer, every food transporter wants to make profit. But we also need to keep this in mind because of the fact that a lot of our really terrible illnesses are coming from this area. So the quickest and easiest way to get an indication, not a complete knowledge, but to get an indication of how your metabolism is doing, given what you're eating and what your lifestyle is to measure your waistline and measure your height. A healthy metabolism normally will have approximately the waist measurement should be half of the height measurement. So, for example, I'm 1.5 meters, more or less, 1.5 meters in height. So my waist measurement should not be, should be around, what, 7.5? 0.75 of a meter. So that is kind of ideal. It can be a little more or a little less. But if it's a lot more, let us say it goes to the point of being a meter and above, then definitely it means that my waist is enlarging and it is an indication that my metabolism is not going very well. There are other indicators. So that is a simple one that one can do at home. But the other measurements, for example, you can go to your doctor or pharmacist to have your blood pressure taken to see how your blood circulation system and your heart are doing. There's also measuring the blood sugar, maybe before you have had a meal, like the fasted blood sugar, so that you tell how your sugar system is going. So with your medical practitioner or your pharmacist, you can get some of these tests just to get an idea. And I recommend this, something like the blood sugar checking, if you have a family history of diabetes type 2 and so on. It's a good thing to try and get to the bottom of how things are going with you, because some of these things do tend to run in families. Next, why is it that we process food? So we have developed many ways to process food in order to make it more palatable. So, for example, think about raw meat versus cooked meat. Cooked meat is a lot more palatable than raw meat for most people. I know there are people who cook their meat very little, like they like their steak rare and so on. But cooking does make an important difference to the palatability of certain foods. If you think about beans that have been stored and are dry, they can cause a serious stomach upset if it is not well prepared and cooked in a way that makes them easier to digest. So those are some of the reasons. Also, some of the processing makes the food more storable. So, for example, drying can make some things like grains and pulses and so on. Even meat, if you come from some of our cultures, in order to keep the meat before the times of refrigeration, the meat would be dried and salted in order for it to last longer and to be easier to transport. So you also have processes like fermentation, which can add value to the food by making it more beneficial and easier to digest. So for some people, digesting fermented milk is easier than fresh milk. For some people, fermented grain can be easier. And I'm not talking about alcohol. I'm talking about, let us say, for example, porridge might be more palatable for some people if it is fermented. And that is because the fermentation process brings in some friendly microbes into our gut that helps with the digestion process. And I think you have, for those who have been training with us for a while, you have often heard me talking about including fermented foods from your culture, because they will help you with some of these issues. Milling is another important one that gives variety. But as I said, milling can be a problem unless you do it yourself. If you get your grain and you take it to the millers, you know exactly what you are getting. If you buy it prepackaged, then one hopes that the information you are getting on the packaging is right. Okay, sometimes we can process food to the degree that we turn it into a toxin. So, for example, if you think about some of the grains that I said that can be fermented into alcohol of different potencies. I recently had someone say that alcohol is not safe at any dose, which means that I know there was some time ago there was a story about red wine and its health benefits. I'm afraid that turned out to be a hoax. So if some of us still believe that red wine is some sort of healthy thing to drink, I think maybe go with something else that is does not have so many of the problematic effects that alcohol may have, both socially and health-wise. But what we might not be aware of is that for the health of our liver, which is one of the organs we'll talk about sometime in the future, for the health of our liver, sugar and alcohol are almost equally toxic. And in fact, a lot of the liver diseases and problems that we have now are more from sugar than from alcohol. And this is because sugar has got no age restriction, unlike alcohol. So alcohol can only be bought and, legally bought by people above a certain age, but sugar can start being given right from birth. So think about a child who starts getting drinking formula that is heavily sweetened. They have already started on a history of working against their liver health. And that is why I'm always emphasizing the need to do your best for young mothers to do their best to breastfeed their babies rather than use formula. That old story that formula was more beneficial than breast milk was an out and out lie for the sake of profit. So I know that there are some of our sisters who struggle with establishing breastfeeding because it doesn't happen automatically well for everyone. But as much as possible, it should a good attempt should be made to ensure that each baby has access to breast milk. Next, minimally processed food. I often mention this. So these are foods that you can easily recognize because not much has been done to them. So for example, if you take common pieces of meat that we might eat, if you grew up on a farm like myself, you'd run after the chicken, catch it, slaughter it, and boil it. And that's all the processing that you do. So that is minimal processing. If it is vegetables, you go into the garden, pick the leaves, wash them, chop them, cook them. That's all the processing you do. So minimally processed food have the advantage, especially these days, of you know exactly what you're getting. So if there is a problem, you know where the problem might have come from. There are no food additives and there is no stripping of certain nutrients. It may be that in the process of cooking, you might lose some of the nutrients, but definitely you will get the majority of them if you are doing your cooking with a certain amount of care. What else did I want to say? Okay, then I wanted to say a word or two about meal timing and portion size. So this is how frequently we eat and how much we eat. This is as important as the food themselves, because so far I've been talking about food and processing and all that. But another thing that has crept into our lifestyle is eating and having snacks in between meals. Maybe you have 3 meals plus you have 6 snacks or something like that. This is not helping our health at all because it is ending up with us having weight struggles. So how frequently we eat is as important as what we are actually eating. And the amount that we eat should be targeted at satisfaction, that is, that we are no longer hungry, rather than fullness. I know when I was growing up, we are often encouraged to eat until we are full. But that was, of course, because maybe in many parts where we grew up in those years, the food shortage was quite common. But just to be aware that the portion size is important, especially if you or your loved ones are starting to show unhealthy weight gain. This is especially of concern for young children because we are noticing childhood obesity and overweight is increasing more and more. So it's important to start teaching young children to gradually reduce the snacks that they are taking. Of course, very small children, because they've got very small stomachs, cannot eat enough to last from one meal to the other. So at that stage, they may get a snack, try to make it a healthy snack. But for an adult who has got no obvious illness that requires taking medication and timing the food with the medication, there is no real reason to eat between meals. So for those who often send me the question about what products to take in order to lose weight, there, as far as I know, there isn't a product that is going to do that. The thing that we need to do is get into better eating habits, myself included, and also get moving more so as to increase our energy out, the energy that we use from our food, rather than to eat plenty and move little. This is problematic. So the lifestyle side of our healthy metabolism includes avoiding or minimizing excessively processed food. This is one thing that we should really try to do. I think I've mentioned a bit about why they are problematic, the additives in them, and the stripping things out of them, and so on. Opt for water rather than fruit juice. For example, we now have established that most fruit juices are as damaging to our health as the other sugar drinks. So rather than squeezing the juice out of the fruit, for most people, unless you are ill and are unable to eat, I would say eat the fruit rather than drink the juice of it. Avoid foods with chemical additives such as preservatives, flavorants, colorants. If it's once in a while, remember for most of these things, the problem is in the dosage. So do try to avoid them as much as possible. They may be a once in a while experience. Then minimize or eliminate substances which have been identified as damaging. The human being is the only animal that eats things which are already established to be bad for us. So we would be the ones who smoke tobacco, even though it has been found to be very dangerous for our health. We are the ones who will go and drink alcohol, even though it is ruining our lives and our health, and so on. So try to minimize or eliminate such substances to protect your organs that have got to go and detoxify. Because remember, our bodies will struggle to detoxify these things until the system collapses. So your liver will be working until it is so diseased that it's no longer able to work. We must not forget our friends in the gut, the friendly microbes, that we should try to eat food that supports them. And if, for example, we've been sick and we need to take antibiotics, remember antibiotics kills everything, the good and the bad. We may need to try to reestablish our microbiome by taking up supplements for it if you have them in your market. If not, you can use the fermented foods that I mentioned earlier. Now, let us turn to the Neolife products that we can recommend for a healthy metabolism. So here I'll simply speak about the general ones first. So we have Trianen, which is our basis of health. This is for cellular health as well as mitochondrial health. You'll remember the mitochondria are the little organelles that live that are inside the cell, and they are very much heavily involved in our metabolism. So Trianen works at the cellular level and at the mitochondrial level. Very, very essential to start there. Next is Pro-Vitality and Neolife Shake. So these ones cover any nutritional shortfalls that we may have in our diet. So Neolife Shake will give us a broad range of amino acids, which our body will use for building proteins. This will give a boost to the protein in our diet, which we can get from good meats and also from beans and nuts and so on. We have next there omega-3, which is also found in Pro-Vitality. And here, if you come from a culture such as I come from, where our diet was based on fish, then it's very hard for many of us to get as much fish as we used to be able to get. So omega-3 is a very important one for very many specialized functions, such as the health of our eye, the health of our brain, fighting against the inflammation. So very, very essential. Then we have carotenoid complex in our Pro-Vitality, that is phytonutrients, a range of phytonutrients that will help with immunity and detox and a whole lot of other things. We also have multi, which is a broad range of minerals and vitamins. So the basic is Provitality, 3NN at the foundation. Remember, Provitality already contains 3NN. So if you opt for Provitality, you don't need to get the 3NN separately. And Neolife Shake. So that will be your foundation for supporting your metabolism. But in addition to that, I wanted to mention a few other things. First is botanical balance. If you have blood sugar issues, or if you've got a familial history of blood sugar issues, maybe you've got a family member who is pre-diabetic or diabetic, is an important thing to add. Then vitamin B complex, also very essential. It can help with energy production. It helps with the making of blood and a lot of the health of blood and the making of blood. And so if you've got cardiovascular issues, if you've got mood issues, older people may find that they are lacking energy. Vitamin B complex can be a good basic addition to support our metabolic health. Then we have vitamin C that helps in wound healing, in connective tissue, in absorption of iron. Iron is used in making blood. And also vitamin C supports a robust immune system, helping us to fight off illness. So vitamin C can also be something that we add to support the repair and the health of our tissues. Now, finally, in the last minutes, because I see I've taken Pascal's minutes, the last thing I would like to finish with is to just mention that sometimes people ask us, why should I take these supplements? Am I going to take them for the rest of my life? Why can't I just rely on my food and my diet? And of course, this is true that supplements supplement. We are not seeking to replace food. This is the first thing we have to help everyone to understand. But there are certain reasons why we do need to supplement, and not everybody needs to take everything. You may look and see what it is you actually need to take. So, for example, maybe not everybody needs botanical balance, but if you look at the research and the numbers that are coming out, very many people have sugar issues and would benefit from botanical balance. That does not mean that everybody is included. So the first thing I would like to mention in that connection is that we are not trying to replace food. We are trying to supplement anywhere where there are gaps because of the reasons that I mentioned before. Next, the age and the aging process changes our metabolism. So you may find as you reach the stage I am in life that some things are harder to digest, some things are harder to absorb, and that means that the nutrients you would have been getting from them, maybe you are not getting as much as you formerly could. So aging and the aging process can lead to a poor digestion. It can lead to certain illnesses or simply just certain problems with eating and with food. So for that reason, you may find that you need to supplement. Next, of course, is that it can the supplements can mitigate against hazards related to our occupation or our environment. So, for example, let's say you live in the city and it is very smoky and dusty and so on. We find that you easily get certain illnesses like respiratory illnesses and so on. And your supplements might actually help you to be able to recover and bounce back faster. Let's say you work in a factory where the conditions are not optimum. You are not able to change your job at the moment. Then you may find that supplements may help you here and there. Also, there are bad choices that we might make, taking things we should not take, and so on. This may rob us of some of the nutrients that we need to be having, or may our liver or kidneys might be using those nutrients in order to detox, which means we might need to supplement. And finally, of course, there are illnesses where by the use of supplements, we are able to give our body the extra that it needs to fight against the illness. So all in all is just to tell the people who ask us this question that what we are offering them is a way to help their body to be what it needs to be. It's not a matter of how long or or whatnot. We are not, these are not medicines. What we are saying is we are supplying you with a concentration of nutrients, which will help your body to do better. And if you don't take them every single day, it's just like some days you eat a much more nutritious food than other days. So if, let's say, there are financial constraints, it is better to discuss if there are financial constraints. What is your budget? How can we be able to fulfill for you what you need? It may just be that you're only able to buy 3NN. We don't need to push someone to buy more than what they are able to afford. We can, if someone is able to get more than that, then we can discuss and see. So the thing I think I should have mentioned is also children's supplements. These are also important because remember, children are in a special stage where they are growing very fast and they need often to get some help here and there because sometimes their food preferences are not the best. And if you, for example, your baby is going into a creche or going to start school at a very tender age, you may find that they are picking up a lot of infections. And by giving them something like VitaGuard and VitaSquares, you may help them to be able to fight back and build a stronger immune system as they go ahead. So I think that I shall stop there. This was a fairly long session, but as I said, a lot of our issues are coming out of our metabolism, and so we are going to talk about this more. As I said at the beginning, if you find you have a question, do send it along. On the other hand, of course, there is much more information about these issues, so you can dig around for yourself and get yourself better informed, because these illnesses are really decimating our lives. And here on our continent, most of the time, we do not have the medical facilities and abilities and finances to treat them because they are long-term illnesses that require a long output of care to deal with, and some of them might not be easily corrected. So with that, let me wish you a good evening, and thank you very much for having spent the time and your data on this training. I want to hand you over to Pascal, who is right here beside me, ready to take you through the next session. Have a good evening, and see you next week, God willing.
Thank you very much. That was quite a lot of information. I'm sure that many people will be requesting this recording. Let me go straight to our session today. And our session this evening is a power of stories. Why is stories a very, very important aspect of building our business? For a number of reasons. The most effective way to teach is to tell stories. One, because when you tell a story, your hearers put themselves in the story itself. Number two, a story captures the imagination of whoever is hearing the story. And number three, there are lessons hidden in the story. So one of the ways to get prospects or to inspire people to join the business is to tell stories. You will realize that if when you go to any presentation, either one-on-one or you go for a big meeting, all the speakers always share their stories of how they came to join the business. And that is what really sells the presentation. There's a saying we have, facts tell and stories sell. And the reason why stories tell is because hearers find themselves emotionally connected to the stories that are being told. So, what are the elements of a good story? What part of the story actually captures the imagination of your hearers? First, stories of profound change. That simply means that the story you are saying causes change that people actually can relate to. The second part of a good story is the person who is saying the story is normal like you and I. He is not somebody extraordinary. He doesn't come from another planet. Somebody who is just a normal citizen of the country, but has been changed by that what Neolife has done. So there are 4 parts of telling your story that you need to think about. Step number 1, what was life before you joined Neolife, either health-wise or money-wise or career-wise. You will always hear people who are telling stories about Neolife. They tell you how their life was before they joined the business. Number two, how they encountered Neolife. What are the things they did? How did they meet their sponsor to join the business? Number three is what benefits have they experienced since they joined the business, either health-wise or financial-wise, or a completely change in lifestyle of what they've experienced in the business. And then the last part of telling a story is how does the future look like? These are the four parts of telling your story that if you master and you begin to tell people your stories about how the business is done or what the business has done for you, you will have a very high rate of sponsoring people into the business. Another aspect of a good story is that you need to be emotionally engaged with your audience. Why? How do you get emotionally engaged? One is to tell aspects of the story that either there was a challenge which is overcome, or something exciting has happened, or something that was never expected happened. The other one is a sense of integrity. The person who is speaking has to tell a story which is actually true and accurate. Why is that important? Because you don't need to change the story from one day to another. The way you deliver the story might be different, but the essence of the story remains the same. And then you need to have eye contact. Why is eye contact important? Because you need to connect with the people. When you look at somebody in the eye, you connect with the person you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a large group, it's a different approach. You don't train your eye on one person. You keep moving your eye to different people in the audience. The other thing is use appropriate body language. Why is that important? Only 8% of the message we send is actually the content of the story. The rest is body language, your enthusiasm, the tone of your voice, the strength of your voice, the pitch, the tone, everything that you say is mirrored, not in what you say, but how you say it. And then the struggle to reach a certain level. If you really listen to some of the stories of very successful people in our business, they will all tell you that they've gone through very many challenges to reach the level they have reached. So this, you need to think about these aspects of telling your story. The four elements are: number one, how you came to join what life was like before you joined the business. The second part, how you encountered Neolife. The third part, what benefits have you experienced, either product-wise or the income that you've generated, or how the business has changed your life. And the fourth part is, how does the future look like? Those are the essence of a powerful story. Just to give you an example, Betty and I started the business almost 29 years ago. And the reason we started was very simple. Money, money, money. That was really the reason for starting the business. I was working for a consulting company in engineering, and I remember our first check that I received as a salary, 33% of my income went to tax. So the first month I went to Betty and said, we left Kenya, and because of tax, it looks like we are earning the same amount of money we are earning in Kenya than here. We have to do something to change our lives. So, as a dutiful son, I registered to do a postgraduate course in Johannesburg. So I would work until 4 o'clock, drive to Johannesburg, attend some postgraduate courses, and then come back at 9 o'clock in the evening. Because I believe that the more education I had, the more successful I was going to be. But when I finished my postgraduate course and I presented my certificate to my employer, there was not a single cent of increase in my salary. And that really frustrated me, because I had spent an extra equivalent of $4,000 to do a postgraduate course, and there was no return on that investment. That was very poor investment. So we started looking for other things to do. I remember Betty sent her CV to all the English-speaking schools in Pretoria because she's a trained science teacher. but she didn't get a job. I remember a statement she made that I've looked for a job long enough, let the job come and find me at home. And 2 weeks after she made that statement, our sponsor, or the lady who sponsored it in the business, called Betty. I said, Betty, I know you have a sick child, but there's a business you can start and do from home. But she said, I don't know how to do a business. I said, no, just come for the meeting. So Betty went for the meeting. I stayed at home to look after our boys. When she came back, she explained that, look, I don't know how the business works, but I think it is something we can do. Being mathematically minded, I want to know the numbers. So I said, okay, how much money do you need to start? She said 425 Rand. At that time, we didn't have money. So the next day, I think it took us 2 days to decide. The next day, I wrote a check. I called my bank manager and said, look, I've written a check. I want to start a business. Please honor that check. The bank manager almost fainted. There was quite the silence on the other side. I said, look, it's only 425 Rand. Then he told me, what kind of business is that? That's how we got started. So if you're a guest and you're attending this meeting and you don't have money, join the club. We started with no money. So the 425 Rand is what we invested. When they brought our kit, they explained how the business worked. They showed us some products. And then I sat down and being fascinated by numbers, I said, if Betty and I recruit 3 people this month, the next month, everybody in our team recruited 3. If we keep on doing that, after 12 months, I calculated the figure was 16.1 million people. I thought I'd made a mistake. I took my calculator, removed the cells, checked that the connections were okay. I repeated the calculation to 16.1 million. I told Betty, even if 1% of what they told us is true, it is worth attempting. That is how we got started in the business. Our first check was an exciting $3. I took that check, framed it, and put it on the wall to show where we started. And we worked very hard the first 3 years. I would wake up Betty in the middle of the night and tell her, look, I've remembered so and so. We started talking to people. After 7 months of very hard work, I equaled my salary. That's when I decided this was going to be my career. So Betty and I worked very hard. We've had fantastic success, not only income-wise, but health-wise. Our second born has got sickle cell, and because of the products, he managed to go through to school, finish college, and now he's working with Absa Bank. So even if the money wasn't good, at least from the health side, Neolife has given really fantastic. But the one story I'd like to leave you that I found very, very exciting for us is in the year 2000, Neolife was having the convention in the Palace of the Lost City. It's a fantastic hotel, which is about 160 kilometers from Pretoria. So Betty and I qualified to be paid for by the company, but we paid for our 4 boys to go and spend 3 nights at the Palace of the Lost City. It was a fantastic experience. We drove from here. When you got to Sun City, when you got to the gate, we were told, sir, please leave your car. We'll park it for you. So we left the car. They went to park the car. They took our luggage, brought it to the reception. We checked in. They gave us some plastic cards. You used to open the door. So when we went to our room, we slide the plastic, and the green button comes on, and the door opens. When the door opened, the TV came on and said, welcome, the Olo family. Our second born, Felix, who is ill, says, Mommy, this is life. Such experiences you cannot buy with money. Those are some of the things that really have happened to us in the business. The future looks very bright for us because of what has happened to us and the stories that we keep hearing from one person to another of what Neolife has done in their life. This is what keeps us going in the business. So for the guests who are here, if you're an old distributor, rekindle your dreams again because they're going to become true. Go back, dust the dreams that you've written down that maybe you have forgotten, put them on the wall, put them on your fridge, put them on their dressing mirror so that you can look at your dreams to keep you going, to keep you building the business. And to finish up, I'd like to share with you some of the people skills that I think are very important if you're going to build our business. The first one is, when you meet people, begin with praise and honest appreciation. Most of the time that when we see wrong things, our immediate response is to criticize or say things or want to correct. But I would say that if you really want to have good relationship with people, the first thing you need to do is to have praise and honest appreciation. And this is important, especially for our business, is this, because when people are new, they're going to make mistakes. You are also going to make mistakes. When you keep pointing out people's mistakes without appreciating what they do, you will alienate a lot of people from yourself. And that is what really holds your growth of the business. So the first thing is begin with the praise and honest appreciation. Identify positive aspects of people and be very specific. Don't tell somebody, oh, you look very nice. No. If you look at, for example, somebody is wearing a beautiful pair of shoes, they say, so-and-so, your pair of shoes really look lovely and they match your dress. Or if somebody is wearing a suit, I really like your suit. You have a very high taste of dress. That is very important because the average person does not hear anything good in their lives. So be the cheerer when you meet people the first time. The second thing is, calls people's mistake indirectly. Why is this important? Because most people make mistakes. And when they make a mistake and you go directly to correct the error, you will find resistance. I was watch sometimes when I pass through places and I see people. They've written at the back of the window of their car, please wash me. So the person may have not washed their car for a long time, but when they see such a sign on their window, they know what they need to do. So calls people's mistakes indirectly. Or if somebody has made a mistake, you ask them, is there anything we can do to help you grow to the next level? I was reading a story this afternoon when I was preparing for this session. This is an engineer. He was building a company and he was very particular about writing reports. And he prepared a book that when he's unsure of a meaning of a word, he would go and check in a book. So he's written down so many words whose pronunciation he was not very sure, or the spelling. So he didn't want to correct his secretary, who was making 3 or 4 mistakes in every page. So she thought about it. The next day she called her to the office and said, when I started writing reports, I used to make so many mistakes. So what I did, I took a dictionary and put it on my desk. And when I didn't know the spelling of a word, I'd go to my dictionary, check the spelling, and check the meaning of that word, and I write it down in a notebook. So I have a notebook with lots of words whose pronunciation and spelling I did not know, and it's really helped me. Maybe it can help you too. And then he stood up and went. The next report he received from his secretary, he found that there were no spelling mistakes. That is what aspect number 3 talks about. Talk about your own mistakes before you point out people's mistakes. Why is that the case? Because if the person sees that you also make mistakes, their chances of changing their own mistakes or correcting the mistakes is higher. But if you constantly point out people's mistakes and they never hear you talking about your own mistakes, you're just creating resistance and enemies in whatever organization you are. So I would encourage you, if you want to correct people's mistakes, point out your own mistake first before you correct others. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you very much for spending this evening with Betty and myself. I hope some of the information we've shared with you are going to help you grow your business to the next level. Good night and God bless.